I can't believe I can finally say this, but Simplicity finally did something right. If you are new here, hi, my name is Stephanie Canada. I am a vintage sewing pattern absolute nerd, and I love to line up vintage patterns with their reproductions and see how they compare. And let's just say that since Simplicity started doing these reproductions in about the mid-2000s, there has been one chant that started out low and started to grow. Gunne Sax, Gunne Sax, Gunne Sax, Gunne Sax! Which turned into an almost scream from the top of Mount Crumpet in the peak cottagecore in 2021. And, well, in proper Simplicity fashion, they didn't listen. And so here we are in 2026, and they've finally done it. And yes, thank you for asking. We have been waiting for forever, and so let's just go ahead and dive right on in, starting with the envelopes. And well, as far as the fronts go, there isn't much difference. All they really did was took their original line art and photography, slapped it on a new envelope, put a different number on it, which is always irritating, and called it a day. Oh, but we can't forget that in the bottom left corner of the new envelope reads the most important part of this entire thing. It says, authentic. We're gonna hold that like our words in kindergarten and wait until recess to let them all spill out, because I am sure I will have something to say about it when I actually look at the pattern. Because as far as the back of the envelope goes, it's pretty much the same deal. While some of the categories might have moved around a little bit, there is all the same information. Except for one key difference on the new envelope. It actually tells you the finished garment measurements. But I can hear yourself asking, Stephanie, isn't the pattern different? You know, the sizes. There's no way that they're the same from 1982 to now. Oh, sweet summer child. No, absolutely, these sizes have not changed since 1972. So there is no difference in the size range from 1972 patterns to now. Because since that time, the Big Four did an invisible handshake across the board, just saying, we're not going to change them anymore. We're good. And then they all got bought out by the same corporation, so now they really don't care. So no, the sizes on that pattern are the exact freaking same, which should make this a little easier when it comes to the pattern. But now, let's look at the instructions. And as you can see, they just went copy, paste, and put it on the new paper. Literally exactly the same instructions, no further updates as far as the original instructions go. Now this time, I will have to give it to them. They did add an additional page. Oh my God, what did we do to earn this extra page? Oh, that's right, all the widths have basically changed since then, so they actually gave you updated widths and a couple extra glossary terms to help you out. But before we go into the nitty-gritty of these sewing patterns, I want to stop and chat about my new favorite source to find amazing deals, Whatnot, the sponsor of today's video. Whatnot is the #1 live streaming selling app where you can find quality vintage items at great prices. Now going into this, I knew I wanted to find some amazing calico to go with this Gunne Sax pattern that, yes, I do plan on making in my size. And Whatnot had exactly what I needed. I ended up buying this beautiful burgundy Wamsutter striped floral. Now, usually I would see these listed for upwards of $20 a yard, but I was able to get 2 yards of this beautiful fabric for $7 a yard. And it's as easy as finding an auction, swiping to bid, then you have to wait.
Thank you so much.
Which meant that I had room in the budget for this lovely little green calico as well. But if vintage isn't your thing, there are a huge number of categories that you can choose from when you want to shop on Whatnot. So if you want to get started with Whatnot today, make sure you check out the link down below in my description or scan the QR code here to get $15 off of your first purchase on Whatnot. Which means that these two fabrics in total cost me $28 for 4 yards of fabric. And if you were to use that $15 credit to Whatnot, all of this would have cost $13. And that sounds like a heckin' deal to me. Plus, as a special bonus, if you follow me on Whatnot, I am going to be partnering with them to give you $500 whatnot credit to spend on their site. And that could get you a whole mountain of fabric. And you can feel like you went to our dearly departed Joanne's one last time. And Whatnot will be contacting the winners in about a month to let you know if you've won the $500 giveaway. And thank you to Whatnot for sponsoring today's video. But now, let's go dig into the actual thing we came for, those pattern pieces. So let's get started with Simplicity 3213 versus its original 5490. And I like to start with the big pieces. So the skirt back looked promising until I looked closer and realized the modern is 3/8 inch too wide. It was also a 1/4 inch too short for some reason. The skirt front had similar issues, with the modern being 1/8 of an inch too short and still maintaining that 3/8 inch too wide. Then I jumped over to the sleeves, and that's where the problems really came. Because I feel like what happened was they widened the sleeve as if you were doing a full sleeve adjustment, where everything gets slightly wider and shorter on the sleeve. So when you line it up at the top, one side tapers from the 8 down to the 10 marking on the modern piece. The sleeve bottom, you can see, is less curved, and the other side on the modern is a full 1/4 inch wider all the way down. And this style of change maintained through all of the sleeves, with one side having a taper and the other side being a 1/4 inch too wide on the modern pieces, with everything having a slightly wider sleeve head. I sure hope they opened up the arms eye to go with this. And once the bodice came, the problems hadn't stopped. Not only did they raise the neckline on the 10 1/8 of an inch, they also made the shoulder attachment 1 full 1/4 inch wider on the modern piece. And that wideness translates all the way down, with some points being slightly slimmer to about 1/16, and all the way back to a 1/4 by the time you get to the bottom. And yes, I had lined it up exactly on the center front. The bodice side front was also strange, because it does look like an exact duplicate of this piece because of the bust curve that they gave it. So they did not regrade from a modern block. That's the exact same curve. However, when I lined the piece up along the waistline, not only was the modern 1/8 inch wider toward the center front, while shockingly lining up perfectly along the 10 along the actual side, but then when you get to the connection point where the arm's eye meets the front meets the side front, the change is close to 3/8 of an inch, with the modern piece being that much larger than the vintage one. And the bodice back was no better, with the modern being 1/8 of an inch longer at the center back, 1/4 inch again at the shoulder. The arm's eye is getting wider and flatter so that the modern piece is 3/8 of an inch wider along the side once again. And those same small changes stayed through all of the small pieces corresponding, where everything was slightly wider and slightly off. Even the rectangular pieces, like the tie end, that really had no reason to have changed size. And I laid down the first pattern piece of the next pattern and couldn't do it. I just need to rant for a second, because you want to know what I'm tired of, y'all? I am tired of these companies coming out here and saying, authentic vintage reproduction, when it's not. Because authentic would mean 100% authentic, no changes made. That's what it means to be an authentic product. 100% not adjusted, not modernized, none of that. And I understand that of all of the patterns that I've done in this series, this is probably the least egregious, but when you start adding in 3/8 of an inch to a back side seam, you times that by 2, now you're up to 3/4 extra in the back, and then you think about all the extra that was on the front, so you've got probably 1.5 inches of ease in there. What? Poor K. And I understand that you might be thinking, oh, well, the undergarments were different and all this. Y'all, this is the 70s. This is the 70s. We've gone through the 60s at this point. Yes, there are still some supportive garments, but the bras are generally pretty close, and the girdles were not nearly as prevalent, especially in a gunny sax. So, what's your excuse, Simplicity? Because at this point, I'm so done. I'm so done. I'm tired of having to go through these patterns and pick apart all the stuff that you didn't do. Because at the end of the day, it's all about what the consumer trusts in you. If your consumer can trust you to put out your product correctly, efficiently, every single time, then you'll have a return customer. You'll have happy customers. You'll have people who want to tag you in things, who want to do all this for you. But when you make patterns with more ease than necessary, what's the point? What's the point? What was the point of that? Like, you're telling me that the distance from our arm to the bottom of the armpit, this arm's eye, really needed that much ease in a size 10? We're not even talking about my size. God only knows what it's going to be like when I attempt to make one of these. I've given the critiques, I've given the feedback. I know y'all watch this. Someone from Simplicity definitely either watches this or my Instagram. How do I know? Just trust me. Why are you doing this? If you don't want to make vintage reproductions, then stop. It's literally that simple. If you can't do it accurately, don't do it. And unfortunately, pattern after pattern proved that all of these changes from the first one continued on through most of the rest. From bodices being too long, to sleeves being too wide with adjusted arms eyes. Every single thing is different. And it boggles the mind that a company so large, that is so concerned about maintaining and growing its customer base, is out here making patterns that arguably are not what originally was produced. But despite everything, there was one pattern that shone through above and beyond all of its friends. 3212 and 8728 looked to be basically the exact same. There were extraordinarily minor changes, such as to the curve of the neckline or a gentle sloping of the arm's eye, and that was it. So whoever this drafter was gets a gold star, give them a raise, because they knew exactly what they were doing. Update from editing Stephanie. They have now since dropped 4 new patterns, 1 Gunny Sax and 3 more Jessica McClintocks. Will I be comparing those? No, I will not. So what exactly is the take home from this whole comparison? Well, it's that Simplicity, McCall's, etc., the big 4, the no longer owned individually companies, are going to do whatever they want with their patterns. Because even sometimes when you have a pattern that has been so demanded, a brand that has been known and asked for over and over and over again, they're still gonna mess with it. And that's just something we all need to know. Because this pattern, in my opinion, these patterns are not designed for a modern aesthetic. They're not designed for a modern audience, which is who would want the changes that they gave them. These patterns should be marketed to the vintage sewist, who probably knows their vintage pattern size by heart by now. And if you don't, you're learning which ones work for you. But a lot of my friends know exactly what size pattern they need from what eras. So when you start messing with it, even though you haven't bothered to update the sizes since the early 70s, they don't want to make the exact same thing. And I refuse to believe that it's some type of copyright because, as per these two laws from the late 1800s, you cannot copyright the actual pattern. You can't, because you're designing it to be used and used and used and used and used and used and used. So that itself can't be copyrighted. What is on their copyright is the envelope cover, the instructions on the inside. Those are the parts that are under copyright. So the changes that they did weren't because of some imaginary copyright. It's because they want to screw with it. They think they're doing us some type of favor, when in fact, what they're actually doing is making their product more annoying to use. But what can we do? And I do mean we, I mean me and you. One, you can write to Simplicity's customer service. Here's their email. Tell them that you are tired of them messing with these patterns. Tell them that you would like exact reproductions of the pattern, not just the instructions. Tell them that the instructions actually need more information because they are the vintage style that would have had an entire book accompanying them to fill in the blanks from the pattern. Request that information. The only way that they will know about this is if we tell them. You can also go and try and find some indie brands. I personally found two, one of which is much more what I think of a classic gunny sax from Oh Me Oh My Sewing, and another is more of a idea of a gunny sax with some updates like a smocked back and the front being closed, which if you want a more classic line is pretty easy to adjust. Because those are the type of people that care so deeply about getting you these patterns that they've been trying to figure them out long before Simplicity ever did it. So let's support those folks. And when in doubt, you can also just buy the originals. Yes, the ones that survived are usually the smallest. That is absolutely correct. However, I did find that Mrs. Depew's book on sizing up patterns is what helped me the most when I needed to learn how to size up a pattern from a bust 36 to my size, which is a bust 50. So are there always going to be some challenges like that? Absolutely. But there's still a ton of original vintages out there. You can go find these things. You can go and buy the originals from the 70s with the original arm size and the original heights and widths. And maybe you just are happy that they made these changes. And if that's so, great. I'm happy for you. I'm also now happy to know what those changes are for those of us that maybe just wanted an exact reproduction. And don't forget that if you want to join me over on Whatnot looking for actual good deals, maybe a gunny sax, make sure that you click the link in the description or scan my QR code to save $15 off of your first order on Whatnot. But until next time, folks, I hope that you are sewing in chaos because heavens knows that's what Simplicity does on a daily basis. Bye. And let's just say that since Simplicity. New company, same bullshit.